A teen's life violently taken away by someone family says she trusted.
It is every parent's worst nightmare. A 16-year-old girl shot and killed in a home this morning, and investigators say her mother's boyfriend was behind it all.
Prosecutors said on Friday Juma was found dead with her clothes in disarray. They go on to say that Brisbon was seen pulling up and adjusting his pants while coming out of their home after 2 shots were heard.
I love my uncle to death. I swear I do. But I will never be able to understand how he did something like this to Lauren.
On a fateful night in late April 2022, 16-year-old Lauren Juma's life was cut short in her own home. According to reports, the situation escalated rapidly when someone she trusted, someone the entire family trusted, her mother's boyfriend, 60-year-old Henry Brisbon, who had been a part of her life for years, tragically turned violent. Despite previous reports of him treating Lauren affectionately, like she was his own child, that night, something went horribly wrong. What led Lauren's mom's boyfriend to all of a sudden turn on Lauren? And could it all have been prevented somehow? Let's find out in the story of Lauren Juma, the sweet 16-year-old who was murdered by her mother's fiance.
He does not need to be let go or set free because that a monster that would kill an innocent little girl that he was in her life, that she trusted.
16-year-old Lauren Juma was many things to many people. Her sister was described as a really beautiful young girl with a beautiful soul who just wanted to go out all the time and enjoy her life while she still had it. Lauren could bring joy and laughter to even the darkest of rooms. To her mom, Lauren was her beautiful and kind little girl. To her friends, Lauren was a bundle of energy. She loved to make people happy and had just joined the cheer team in Nimitz High School just so she could bring love and cheer to everyone. To her dad, Lauren was a wonderful, caring, friendly, and nice person that everyone loved to be around.
My daughter was a very wonderful, caring person. She was very friendly, nice, and she had her friends. Everybody loved her.
Lauren was just a high schooler who had big dreams. She had always dreamed of joining the police force in her state or the military. As long as she was serving her country in some way, she was good.
He says that she had big aspirations, that she wanted to be a police officer or join the military.
Though that was still 2 years ahead, Lauren couldn't wait to graduate from Nimitz High School and begin the journey to making her dreams come true. Her father described her as a good kid, a great friend, and an even better sister.
And I spoke with the 16-year-old victim's father, and he tells me his daughter attended Nimitz High School. He says that she was a good kid, a great sister.
But unfortunately, all of Lauren's hopes and dreams came to a chilling end in the early hours of April 29, 2022. At around 1 a.m. on April 29, 2022, dispatchers received a call from a panicked young woman. She told the dispatcher that her sister was being held captive inside her home by their mother's boyfriend.
Now, investigators say that around 1 o'clock this morning, it was the victim's older sister who called 911 to alert them and let them know that her 16-year-old sister was being held captive at gunpoint inside of the house by her mother's boyfriend.
Officers were quickly dispatched to the house on the 24 Hunler block of Kenton Trace near FM 1960 and Lee Road in Humble, Texas. As they arrived at the scene, they quickly made their way to the front door, but just as they were about to make their way into the house, they heard what sounded like a firearm going off inside the home, followed by a young girl screaming, and then more firearms going off.
The constables went route to the scene. When they arrived, approaching the residence, they heard one gunshot coming from inside the residence, heard screaming, and then a second gunshot shortly thereafter.
The officers were on immediate alert and were already about to barge into the home when a man in his 60s came out of the home and said something very bizarre to the officers.
Almost immediately, a male exited the residence and basically stated, "Y'all do what you have to do."
Officers then made their way into the home and found 16-year-old Lauren Juma laying stiff on the floor. She wasn't breathing.
And detectives say that when they went inside of that house, they found the 16-year-old had been shot multiple times.
The paramedics quickly rushed her to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. The officers that remained on the scene did a thorough search of the home and found there was no one else in the home. It had been just Lauren Juma and her mother's boyfriend. With no other suspects around, officers immediately placed Van Brisbon under arrest. He was then transported to the station for processing, while some officers remained behind to question family members and neighbors. Lauren's family was shattered. They didn't understand how someone who had been in Lauren's life for 5 years, someone who her mother trusted enough to leave Lauren home alone with, someone who was trusted to protect her, would be the very same person to end her life in such a brutal manner.
Right, the family's still trying to wrap their heads around the fact that she was killed and how she was so brutally taken away.
Lauren's mother, Lori Young, spoke to the officers on the scene. According to her, she had been out of town for a work trip. In fact, she was just getting in only to find her daughter dead.
The mother out of town for work, arriving back home to her daughter dead.
She then told the officers the full story of what happened. According to Lori, around midnight, she had received a FaceTime call from her 16-year-old daughter, telling her that she woke up from sleep only to find out that Van Brisbon was standing in her room in the dark.
Investigators say Lauren was on the phone with her mom and her sister prior to her death and said she woke up to Brisbon standing in the dark room acting weird.
She told her mom she tried to get him to leave her room, but he wouldn't listen to her. Instead, he stayed rooted to the spot. Lori told officers her daughter asked her if she could tell him to get out of her room, but according to Lori, instead of Van listening to her and leaving her daughter alone, things took a tragic turn. Lori explained to officers that she told Van to leave while the phone was on speakerphone, but the next thing she heard her daughter say was, "Mom, he has a gun." Before she could respond, the call abruptly ended, and that was the last time she ever heard her daughter's voice. "I just know my baby called me on the phone, FaceTimed me, and she said, 'Mom, help me,' and she hung up the phone. That's the last time I heard her voice." Lori tried to call her daughter back, but there was no response. She also tried Van's phone number, hoping he'd pick up and she could understand what was going on, or at least talk him out of whatever horrible plans he had for her daughter. Unfortunately, Van never answered any of her calls that night. Lori told officers she immediately got on the road to start heading back. By the time she got to their home on Humble, it was too late. She got there just in time to hear the firearm go off and her daughter's life taken away. Lori described how it felt like arriving at the house and hearing those terrifying sounds go off, knowing it was her daughter and not being able to do anything about it. "I was there for 3 minutes before I heard 2 gunshots go off, and I could just remember running up to the house and officers telling me to go back to my car." Lauren's mom could not make sense of what happened. She'd been in a relationship with Van for 5 years and had lived with him for a long time too. She told officers he'd never behaved in any aggressive way towards Lauren. He always treated her like she was his baby. Lauren's mom was not the only one who arrived at the scene, powerless. Her sister was there too, and she told officers how she got to be at the crime scene. She told officers she had received a call around midnight from Lauren, telling her that Van was in her room, he was acting weird and creeping her out. Lauren then begged her sister to come get her. She just wanted to get away, that's all she wanted. She just said he was being really weird and wanted me to pick her up. At first, she didn't think much of it. After all, she'd known Van for years, and he had never behaved off with her, but she soon found out people can change overnight. Immediately, her sister got into her car and drove to their home on Canton Trace Lane to pick Lauren up, but when she got there, she realized that Van had barricaded the door. He was holding Lauren captive, and he wasn't going to let her go. So she called 911. In the meantime, she did everything she could to try to gain access into the house and save her sister, but there was no way to gain entry, so she waited for officers to show up, hoping and praying they could save her sister's life. But unfortunately, the officers arrived just as Van Brisbon carried out the last part of his evil plans.
That is every parent's worst nightmare. A 16-year-old girl shot and killed in a home this morning, and investigators say her mother's boyfriend was behind it all.
Most murder investigations play out in specific ways. Investigators find out who had the most motive to take the life, then speak to everyone, gather forensic evidence before making an arrest. This case played out the opposite way. Officers already knew who did it. He was the only one found at the scene, but the thing they couldn't quite understand was how a man who had been in Lauren's life for that long and had never shown any signs he was dangerous can just change overnight. They could not understand what the motive was, and Van Brisbon was not talking. Though he was immediately charged with the crime, he was refusing to cooperate with the investigators, so they didn't have much to go on.
Deputies tell us that Brisbon, the suspect, has not been cooperative. Again, he has been charged with murder, currently being held in the Harris County Jail.
Investigators then spoke to Lauren's family family to try and find out if there was any bad blood between them and Van that could have led him to do something like that to Lauren. Lauren's mom told investigators that she and Van had not had a fight before she left home, and everything was good between them. So there didn't seem to be any event that tipped him over the edge. They also asked Lauren's sister if Lauren ever complained of any inappropriate behavior on Van's part, and she said no. Lauren had never complained about Van, and she didn't either on that fateful day. With no motive in sight, they decided to look at the facts of the case as they knew it. There was no doubt at this point that Van Brisbon had taken the life of his girlfriend's 16-year-old daughter, so they focused on other things. How Van seemed on that tragic night. Officers that arrived on the scene noted that Van seemed intoxicated and wrote that in their report of the night. So was this an alcohol-induced crime, or was there more to it than they could see? With Van not cooperating, investigators had no leads, so they decided to dig into his pasts, and this is where investigators caught their first big break in the case. A background check into Van revealed that was not the squeaky clean man he made himself out to be. He had more than a few skeletons in his cupboard. Investigators found out that he had a criminal history and had been convicted in 2 states of violent crimes.
And so as for Brisbane's criminal past, we've learned that he does have some charges out of the Phoenix and Chicago area, but it does sound like these charges are from a couple decades ago.
With this information, the case began to pull into focus. Investigators realized he was not just a sweet old man who snapped. He had committed violent crimes before, which meant he could do it again.
A teen's life violently taken away by someone family says she trusted. This once quiet, humble neighborhood still in shock by a shooting that took the life of 16-year-old Lauren Juma, a student at Nimitz High School.
No one could believe the crime that had been committed and the person arrested for it. Members of the community expressed their shock. One person took to the social media app, Twitter, to say, "A big bad wolf dressed in sheep clothes, an ugly monster who preyed on his victim. God only knows how many times he made her feel uncomfortable. Rest in peace, beautiful soul." But it wasn't just members of the community. People who lived next door to them couldn't believe it either. They had never noticed anything off about him, so to them, Van's actions came out of nowhere. One neighbor who spoke with Fox 26 said the neighborhood is rattled by what happened to Lauren, saying it was going to forever change the neighborhood.
This was a good neighborhood, quiet. We don't have crime. So now when you look us up, the only crime you have is a murder, and it's a child.
In the meantime, investigators officially announced to members of the community that Van Brisbon had been arrested and hit with several charges.
Police say the teen was on the phone with her mother just before the shooting. We're told Lauren's older sister was the one who called 911 this morning, telling them that Lauren was being held at gunpoint by her mother's boyfriend.
During his arraignment to court, more heartbreaking information about that tragic night was shared in court. In his first court appearance, the prosecution petitioned the court to raise Van's bond amount because of new details that had come to light. After they shared the new details with the court, the judge agreed to upgrade his bond amount.
The judge approved the state's request to increase his bond to $2 million. That's up from $1 million that was initially set over the weekend.
But that wasn't all.
But we did learn in court just now that charge could be upgraded to capital murder because of some pretty horrific details investigators say that they found on the scene.
The prosecution also told the court they'd like to update the charges against Van Brisbon once they had all their test results back.
Now, in addition to an autopsy, we've also learned investigators have asked for a assault test to be done on the 16-year-old victim because she may have been before she was shot and killed.
The prosecution told the probable cause court judge that when officers walked in and found 16-year-old Lauren Juma not breathing, they also found something else. They found her with her pants down. The prosecution also told the court that when officers arrived on scene and Van Brisbon walked out of the home in Humble, they saw him adjusting his pants.
Prosecutors said on Friday Juma was found dead with her clothes in disarray. They go on to say that Brisbon was seen pulling up and adjusting his pants while coming out of their home.
The judge then asked for those test results to be expedited so they can figure out whether the Van's charge needs to be upgraded before proceeding with trial. The hearing was an emotional one for Lauren's friends and family members who attended, but it was also really emotional for family members of Van Brisbon. The details of what Van Brisbon did to Lauren were so graphic that his niece, who was in attendance, got so emotional in the courtroom she had to be asked to step outside. Once she got outside, she couldn't help it. She burst into tears while she was being interviewed outside of of the door of the courtroom where her uncle's bond was being doubled. Van's niece told reporters outside the courtroom that though she loved her uncle, she understood that he needed to answer for the horrible things he had done.
I can't say that I support my uncle and what he did, because I don't. I love my uncle. He is my uncle. I'm going to always be for him. But at the same time, you have to understand that people have to be accountable for their actions.
She spoke with ABC 13 Houston, saying she was absolutely devastated over what happened to Lauren and also shocked of what her uncle was accused of doing.
I love my uncle to death. I swear I do. But I will never be able to understand how he did something like this to Lauren.
She made it very clear, even though she's his blood relative, she was there only to support Lauren and her family. She even had a shirt made that says, "Here for Lauren." She showed it off as she cried, unable to understand how her uncle could hurt someone he claimed to love, someone who he knew loved and trusted him in that horrific way.
He loved Lauren, and Lauren loved the life out of him. How he could take her life from her, I can never understand it.
Lauren's sister also spoke to the media about how she felt about Van's bond being doubled in an effort to keep him off the streets, and she said she agreed with that decision.
He does not need to be let go or set free, because that a monster that would kill an innocent little girl, that he was in her life, that she trusted.
She spoke about her hope for the trial, saying she hoped the state of Texas wouldn't pursue capital punishment because she felt death was too good for him. She wanted him to rot in prison for what he did to Lauren. After the hearing was over, Lauren's family and friends gathered to remember her. They remembered her for the sweet, caring soul she was. The murder of Lauren Juma had a profound impact on her school, friends, and the wider community. Vigils were held, and the school community came together to honor her memory. Lauren's tragic passing brought to light serious issues surrounding DV and the safety of young individuals in familial settings. Many people weighed in on how long parents should wait before trusting their new partners with their kids. In Lauren's mother's case, she had been with Van for 5 years and could not have imagined the chilling end their relationship would come to. Experts also joined the conversation, sharing the warning signs, preventive measures, and resources available for people who find themselves in similar situations. Lauren's mom, Lori, set up a GoFundMe account to help manage her funeral expenses, as at the time of doing research for this video, the GoFundMe account has received over $20,000. As at the time of the making of this video, Henry Brisbon's trial had not begun. Investigators are still putting evidence together to build their case against him. As we conclude, we reflect on the profound impact of Lauren's story and the lessons it teaches us about safety, community, and justice. Hey, thank you for watching. Our deepest sympathies go to the family and friends of Lauren Juma. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know of other similar cases? Let me know in the comment section. And before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. See you next time, and stay safe.